Good evening, everybody. Today is Thursday, June 2nd, and a special board meeting of the Salem-Keizer School District is called to order. This meeting is a work session, and we welcome Vince Adams, Board Development Specialist from OSBA, who will be leading us through our work this evening. All board members are present except for Director Bethel for tonight's training. Director Enojos Presi?
Thank you. Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Welcome y bienvenidos to the Salem-Keizer School Board meeting. At all times, whether we meet in person or virtual as we are tonight, we strive to be inclusive, respectful, and welcoming to our students, staff, educators, administrators, board members, and all community members. We welcome people of all genders, people of African descent, Black, African American, Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latinx, people indigenous to this land, and people of mixed and multiple descents. Languages spoken in our communities are welcome. Spanish, English, indigenous languages, sign language, Chuukese, Somali, Russian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and many more. People with disabilities, visible or invisible, people of all religions, believers in all faiths or creeds, gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, transgender, queer, two-spirit, or others for whom none of the labels fit. Survivors, your emotions, joy, bliss, grief, rage, indignation, contentment, disappointment, your families, genetic and otherwise, our veterans who proudly served and are currently serving our country, our elders, those here in the room, in our lives, and those who have passed away, people impacted or displaced by the war in Ukraine and other violent conflicts. And we'd like to welcome the ancestors who lived in this land where we live and work. Welcome the spirits of Santiam, Kalapuya, Siletz, and Grand Ronde, the natives who have lived in this area before the Europeans came. Welcome y bienvenidos, and welcome to the start of Pride Month.
Thank you. I'd like you all to join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, before I turn it over to our guest Vince Adams today, just to let you know that there are no agenda modifications, but I'd like to remind everyone of our upcoming June 14th board meeting and a quick status on our return to in-person meetings. We are looking forward to celebrating our graduates and the conclusion of the school year. We'd hope to have our June 14th meeting in person, but our boardroom will not be available as we are beginning renovations. We've been looking for an alternate space for our board meetings over the summer. We thought we had found a location at the Marion County Senate hearing room, but due to facility use fees, security, parking, etc., the space isn't workable for us. So our June 14th meeting will be virtual, but we will continue to look for a workable location with the goal to have our June 28th work session in person. Now at this moment, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence and recognition of the lost individuals, our young students and educators that lost their life at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you, everybody. So moving on to our training for today, I'd like to introduce again Vince Adams. Take it away, please.
All right. Thank you, Chair Avila, Superintendent Perry, Salem-Keizer Board. Thank you for having me back again. I came in to this meeting seeing wonderful pride flags, and then the chair reminded us of what happened in Texas. And so bear with me as I gather my energy once again and dive into this great work that the board has been doing. So just reminding you what we did last time, because it's been a few months since we were able to meet. And so the last time that I was able to meet with the board worked through a series of difficult prompts around what your expectations are for your meetings. What do you want your meetings to look like? What do you want your board work to look like? And based on the input, and there was plenty of input, and we had many, many good conversations in that meeting. We ran out of time. It was going so well. But based on that input, I was able to draft a document. So one of the big outcomes that I need to get from tonight is the take of the board on that document, because it's yours and you need to own it. And so we're going to be going over that. But before I go any further, I want to start with just a fun way to get the meeting started. And so I'm going to share my screen and you will see a prompt here. And I'm going to be using that software that I used last time called Mural, because we will be capturing information. Let me reconfigure my screen so I can see all of you. Excuse me just a moment. Technology challenges. Thank you for the interpreter keeping up with my rapid speech. I will try to speak more slowly. All right. So, okay, so here's the prompt. So this has been a theme of the training that I've been doing with boards all over the state in the last month or two, is that we've just been really focused on our board work. We've gone through our budget cycles, and it's just, we've been nose down, just following our agendas, and we haven't been discussing, things about ourselves, talking about our values and just getting to know each other. And so I'm taking this opportunity to just surface this question. So I want you to go back and think about when you were a little kid, like when you were like 6 or 7 years old. And what was your favorite? What's this memory that comes to your mind of summer? Because summer is here. It's going to be wonderful. And so what is your favorite memory? And now, while you're thinking about that, I'll share mine. So I have this wonderful memory. So where I grew up, I had this tree. There was a tree in the backyard, and we had a rope swing. And so what I would do is I would let the hose run in the dirt under the tree, and then it would just turn into this giant mud hole. And I remember, swinging around on the tree and playing in the mud. And I remember the feeling of the mud going through my toes, and it's a really fond memory of childhood in summer. So there, I set the stage. So that's the type of response I'm looking for. Okay, who wants to go first?
I will go. I had very, very similar, but I will use the growing up on a hop farm, and we just acres and acres of forest, living out in the country, and we would just leave the house and through 4 of my brothers, and we would just run around all day long, get lost, play in pools of water, and eventually come home hungry and dirty. But it was just joy. So fun. Loved
Wonderful. It. Okay, who's next?
I'll jump in. So, I don't know how many people know this, but I actually grew up in Kansas. So my summers were a lot of, playing in the backyard, catching lightning bugs, rubbing them on our shirts to make our shirts glow. And then my mom liked to call our house El Hotel Matachi, because all family members would stop by, even though it was a tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 700 square foot house in the middle of Kansas.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, who's next? I have a list. I will call on you.
I'll go.
All right.
So I grew up in Michigan, not too far from Kansas, Maria. My friend Alice and I would go to the creek and we dig up clay to make Barbie furniture. We had, in her basement, she had a Barbie city that had a theater and a school and just kind of all the things, had all the cans and stuff. So that, I wasn't 6, I was probably more like 9. But anyway, that's one of my best memories.
Marty, please tell me that there's photographic evidence of these constructs.
There might be. I'd have to look at an old photo album. I think we were really into Barnabas, you know, Jonathan Frid. We'd run home from school to watch that. And I think we did a Barnabas play with Ken and one of the Barbies.
That is amazing. What a great story. Thank you so much for that. See, if you don't ask the question, you don't get great stories like that. See? Okay, who's next?
I'll jump in because I don't want to be the last one.
Thanks, Karina.
This is an interesting question, and I wish I had more fond memories, but it's making me reflect of having working parents who were working long evenings because they worked seasonal, well, not seasonal, but like in agricultural sector. So this is when my parents were actually gone for most of the day. And as we got older, my sister and I just kind of got to stay home, and we were told don't step outside. So we spent a lot of time indoors watching TV and coloring and doing that kind of stuff. Once I turned 16, then I went and worked at a cannery myself. And I looked forward to that because then I was going to be making money. So I can think of other times that I had more fun than during the summer breaks.
Thank you so much for that perspective. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I go next? Well, when I was little, my dad was in the Indian Air Force, and he was stationed in Agra in North India. And so my most favorite memories were during summer breaks. You know, all the families from the Air Force Station would go in the back of a pickup, you know, one of those military trucks on a picnic to Taj Mahal. So we like summer, and then we'll cook food, and there's some nice rose garden outside. And those days, Taj Mahal was not so crowded like what it is. So those are the kind of memories that keep coming back. And families from all over, you know, all languages, all background, and like in an Air Force Station, that's the way it was. So it was like they would haul one of those 3-tonner trucks. All the families would go and cook food, and it's like a picnic by the river Yamuna, which is next to Taj Mahal, between that and Agra Red Fort, the other side. And those were beautiful days before the 71 war.
Thank you so much, Satya. Okay, Ashley, I'm calling on you.
I think what first came to mind was just my neighborhood growing up when I was pretty little. The freedom to be outside, like in a bike brigade, wandering wild all across the neighborhood till basically the sun went down, or you heard your mom screaming from the porch that it was time to come home. But just that freedom and feeling and hearing the lawnmowers and the sprinklers and just everyone kind of outside all the time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Love that image. All right. Sharing screen again. Okay. We have to get some work done. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to share is just remind the board of the norms that we have, although the wonderful parameters that you placed on your own meeting are far, exceed this, but yeah. And the board is already doing this. Speaking your truth. Just be present and share authentically. Assume a positive intent. We're all here working towards the needs and to elevate the outcomes for kids. And then let's conduct our work with care and respect. So, okay, so what do we got to get done tonight? So we're going to review that document first. And then we are going to do our unfinished business of developing content for your board superintendent operating agreements. And Superintendent Perry, I'll be pulling you into that conversation. And then I gave you a quiz on the role of the board. And so if time permitting, I would love to work through that. There are fun questions in there that will hopefully elicit some good conversations. And then I want to come back to that board development plan that we looked at last time and think about next steps. Okay. Is there anything else that I need to get out of this time or that the board would like to get out of this time? Not hearing anything. So
I think you're on par, I believe.
Okay.
What we were hoping for.
Okay. So, first item of business, I didn't put it in the outline. Why didn't I do that? You know, you make all these plans and develop these tools for instruction and then they don't work right. Okay, so here's your board operating agreement. You've had this document for a little while now, at least a few days. I hope everybody's had a chance to read through it and review it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through line item by line item. I'll read the item. And then what I'm looking for is feedback from you. How can we make this better? We're trying to improve this document. We're trying to make it align to the needs of your board and your district. So these are words that I came up with. We need to make them your words. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. And as you give input, I'm going to put little sticky notes on there. And then what I'll do is after I get your input, I'll go ahead and revise the document. And then at that point, I'm going to hand it over to the board. And then you and staff can go ahead and make the final last tweaks to it to get it tightened up, unless you want me to do that. But okay, any questions about process? Okay, diving in, I'm going to zoom in here. Item number 1. Children's interests come first. The board will represent the needs and interests of each child in our district. How do we feel about that? Hey, Marty. Yeah, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so unfortunately, you know, I was not able to attend the first one. So I pretty much got comments on everything. I think it should really be the family's interests, not the child's interest, because parents and guardians direct their child's lives. We are not the parent. And this statement says to me that we will do what we think is best for a child without regard to the wishes of a parent. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that these are families that we are working for.
Thanks for that feedback. Other thoughts?
I'll second, kind of dovetailing off of Marty's comment of children's interests. I do think we need to hold in like a very high regard, because like it's about the cultivation and education of our students, but also, I mean, including the important people in their lives about it, caregivers, families, older siblings, you know, the people that are around to help raise this person, because I truly believe that it takes a village. So I guess like my little caveat is like, I don't know if we can add something about how we can open a space for that communication and collaboration, because otherwise like it just feels like, I think like a little bit of what Marty said of like what we feel like what is best for kids, as opposed to like really like hearing what is best for kids.
If I may jump in, my take, you know, I hear the family perspective as when I see interest comes first. I think I including need, like children need as well. And I do value children's interest because I strongly believe that children, regardless of age, have agency in being able to express and voice their interest and needs. So, you know, if we could include perhaps children and families on here, along with interest and needs, that's my suggestion there.
Thank you, Karina. Okay, so Maria, yeah, Karina jumped in there and kind of eclipsed the thought I had around, so how do I capture that communication piece here? How will the board hear the needs of children and families? Okay, great. Good prompts, thank you.
Yeah, okay. May I clarify? So it's not that children don't know what they think they need, but there's a reason they have parents, because they're not mature, they're not grown, and what they think they need is not necessarily the best thing for them. And that's why, and we don't know as a board what is the best thing for them. That's why having the parents being very much into that, in that paragraph, parents, and when I say parents, I mean the families of those children, is very important.
And is the term family adequate to be inclusive of all the types of families that, or important people in children's lives? I'm thinking guardians, grandparents. I mean, is that sufficiently inclusive?
I think the simpler we keep it, the better. I think it gets a little too wordy, and then you're always changing it when you start listing every single type of option. I think there's people that I know that I consider part of my family, but we're not related, right? And so I think family is a good word that each individual can think of however they want for their definition of family.
On that question, can I get a thumbs up from board members on the word family? I just want to make sure. Osvaldo. Ashley, how are you feeling about that? Is the word family adequate?
Yeah, I think probably. Sorry, I'm still processing. I think it's just, I'm thinking of kids who are in foster care or other caregiving situations where they might not feel like it's their family, but it is pretty broad. I'm also just cognizant of kids that aren't coming from necessarily like a loving or healthy, non-abusive home. And so I just need to say that I think when I read this and think of children's interests, there's plenty of parents who are doing the right thing all the time, and we would want to take that into consideration. But if a child is experiencing abuse, so the work that I've done in CASA, and the parent doesn't want the school to intervene, I would still want to intervene for that child experiencing child abuse.
Thank you for that.
Don't always know best when there's a serious, dangerous situation going on.
Vincent, Director Chandigiri has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go Satya.
I would like to use a different word to describe this, if that would capture the intent. Board members have a primary fiduciary duty to advocate for all our children and their families and support system. Because as a board member, I need to have some kind of cultural humility to understand that I may not understand completely about what cultural or lived experience one has. So it is very important for me to have an understanding in that context. And the most important relationship is the child with their, whether it is biological family or foster family or adoptable. That's the way I'm thinking. So one may come from a different culture, or a child may come without their families, a variety of circumstances could be there. But I need to have, for an agreement, we have to keep it simple yet broad enough that we have a primary fiduciary duty towards all our children and students and their families and support system.
Okay. So for you, the word family is adequate.
And then the fiduciary duty, that is the most important word I would like to see inserted somewhere, because that is the ultimate purpose for which we are serving. Because teachers, staff, and everybody else have different people to advocate for them, technically speaking. But we are the last safety net, and the fiduciary duty is for the students and their attachment system, which is a family and support system. That is our primary duty. That is the reason we are a school board director. You're like the union leader for the students and children.
We also have
I would like to
continue.
capture that word, which is our core duty. Core duty is we are the advocates for the students.
Well, we also, I want to add that we also have a duty to our educators in the schools, making sure that their environment.
Correct. I mean, well, we do have, but in the interest of our students. So we want to support our educators because they bring, for the reason the students like saying, we want to make sure we have good doctors so that the patient has a good outcome, right? So for our students' sake, we need to have the best educators, support them with all the resources, tools. But the primary core duty is the students.
So hold up there, Satya. I want to get clarity on the word fiduciary with the rest of the board. How are other board members feeling about the inclusion of the word fiduciary in this particular statement? Yeah, well, I think Ashley, just raise your hand, then Marty.
I think Marty's was up. If Marty, do you want to go?
Thank you, Ashley. I mean, maybe I probably don't know what the real definition is, but when I hear it, I always think of financial. And that's not really what we're about. I mean, using the finances for the best use, for the best for the kids and their families, yes. But so I'm never really quite sure about that word. And maybe I need a better definition.
Okay, thank you. That's why I just looked up the definition, just to confirm. Okay, Ashley?
I would just second what Marty said. I don't think that's quite the right term, but I understand what the concept I think you're trying to get to, Dr. Sharmagary. But yeah, I think of some sort of like legal financial obligation when I think of the word fiduciary.
Right. So,
but since I used the word, let me explain what I at least meant. It's a trusting relationship where we really, the parents bring, and we have a responsibility to have that kind of ethical, trusting duty to fully advocate for the students and children. With that comes making sure we understand and listen to the parents and represent their needs and make sure the teachers and others have all the resources for that. So that is what I meant by that. And that's how I see, like a doctor has a fiduciary duty towards their patient. We are the school board directors have to keep that ethical focus. And that is why I use that word particularly, that is our core duty.
Marty, your hand is up, and then Karina.
Sorry, I must have forgot to lower it. Here
okay.
We go.
Karina, you're up.
Yeah, I have more of a process question because I know that we've been kind of dialoguing about how to rephrase this, and we have several more agreements to go over. So what is the process here? Should we provide feedback and not expect to define or agree on rewording right now? I'd just love to hear so that we can make the best use of our time. But also would love to have input from all board members. So how can we do both?
So correct. And thank you for the question. So we are not going to wordsmith here. So I'm getting input on particular words and concepts that need to be included in the statement. And what I'll do is I'll take those thoughts and I will rewrite this statement. Okay. So, it's too time consuming for a board to do wordsmithing in a meeting. It's not a good use of the board's time. And so that's why I'm trying to capture these concepts. And so that's why I drilled into that question around fiduciary and what did Satya actually mean? And actually his interpretation of that is correct to the denotative definition of fiduciary. But I think here in the States, we have this connotative perception of what fiduciary means, and that's what we heard reflected by other board members. So to capture what Satya was sharing is I wrote the statement, the board will honor its trustee role with regards to children. That's just a note to myself. It's really these green Post-its that you're seeing up here are really notes to myself trying to capture the thoughts of board members. Okay. Does that help, Karina?
Yeah, thank you.
And hopefully we're not going to go into this level of detail, but this particular one, number one, is very important. This is a very important statement. And so I appreciate that the board wants to get this right, because it needs to be right. Any other thoughts on this first statement? Hearing none, moving on to number two, focus on governance. Cultivating a long-range vision for education through strategic planning, setting expectations through policy making, and evaluation of curriculum, district performance, and the superintendent. Yeah, Marty.
So my comment is on the evaluation of curriculum. So I was elected in 2015, and at the time, they were just about to vote on some curriculum. I think it was history or social studies for elementary. The board had an opportunity to look at it. You know, they were like little books. I took some home to look at them. They looked fine, but you know, it's like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what all that encompasses and everything else. And this, I think there was another opportunity, I'm not 100% sure, where you could go into the office. Like, we all have time to go to the district office to sit and look through curriculum. So if we are going to start reviewing curriculum or approving curriculum, what I would hope to see is something where we are the final approver, where we also allow input from the public, so that we can go out and maybe we're not reviewing the curriculum itself so much as we're reviewing the reviews of the curriculum to get an idea if that curriculum actually meshes with our community and what we think is important. And this would also then give parents an opportunity to weigh in on their thoughts. And really, I don't think parents have had really any input into any curriculum, or really that much the board, other than, yeah, you can spend the money. Just my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Marty. I'm looking to the superintendent, and maybe you have some thoughts on this and the role of the board and approval of curriculum, because I don't know exactly how you do it in Salem-Keizer. So I'm kind of looking to you for guidance here.
Yeah, and I think the curriculum adoption, there's two sets. There's supplemental curriculum that's teacher driven, and then there's curriculum adoption. So like when we adopted we haven't had a full scale adoption for a long time. And the dollars in the budget process this year are set for some larger adoptions. So in the adoption process, it goes through teacher review, community review, parent review, and then comes to the board. And so when we get to a couple of those coming up, I'll come in and outline the process for you. So we might use curriculum adoption in that wording. And also, because of the policy governance, it's always interesting to think about, how do you see the policy about curriculum adoption? Because you're the final endpoint of it, but we develop the policy for you, you don't approve it. So I think we should talk about those things. So I would just add the word curriculum adoption as a place.
Great, good suggestion. Maria.
Yeah, my question was about like really that role, and I guess to what extent the board had in terms of oversight of the curriculum, because I know that this has been like a sticking point, that a lot of it is more like, you know, really zooming out, like it's like ODE passing on certain standards, and then like the way it kind of trickles down, as opposed to actually having like a hands-on approach. So I would just kind of like definitely change evaluation of curriculum to whatever like actual like minuscule ability we have over that. And then I know that we get into this a little bit later in the sheet. So just kind of wanted to highlight, like maybe like I would like to see like a harder set obligation for the board to work on a long range, strategic plan. Cause for example, I think that's something that we would have to do maybe every year or every 2 years, and just saying the board will have a board retreat and talk about a strategic plan every single 2 years or 1 year, or whatever makes the most sense.
Sorry, making notes. Great, thank you for that. Satya.
Well, I have a quick feedback on that. There's a Division 22 also requires us to participate in the curriculum adoption process, and there has to be a transparent process with families and community stakeholders, board, everybody. So it's required by the law. So coming back to that particular thing, I like what Second Vice Chair suggested about strategic planning, which really fits in with goal setting. And the goal should be, and then that leads to the result policy, which has not been touched in a while, because really that's a way mechanism. So that is an important thing. So we need to have a little bit longer term, and then we need to have a little bit in between. So I kind of took the liberty of saying, one of the tasks should be taking the number 2 point. I said, board has a duty to ask for accountability, transparency, and ensure essentially safety and academic achievement goals for all our students have achieved. That encompasses curriculum, district performance, etc., because that will be the academic achievement and safety. It's just an example of what I'm trying to say, because they are also required statutorily that we are responsible for safety and academics. Then in that same place, I really wanted to kind of focus on one important thing. I know it's going to be a little hard, but we should also ensure that as a system, as a district, we uphold the civil rights protection of our students and use equitable practices in all our policies and practices, and take all steps needed to dismantle systemic racism and oppressive practices that can potentially lead to disparate harm. This is one of the key performance indicators of our district, which talks about working around dismantling systems of oppression, because I really think we need to call it out. And then only we can start thinking, okay, what is going on, and say, is our vision setting, is our goal setting tied to dismantling the policies or practices, so that we'll close the gap. That's why I wanted to include those words. Hopefully it will be there so that we keep checking it out against that standard.
So I captured the board will.
Can I read it?
Say it again.
Yeah, the board has a duty to ask for transparency, accountability, and ensure safety and academic achievement goals of all our students are accomplished.
Satya, can I have you send me that language?
Oh yeah, I will send it if you want. I wrote it down.
That'll be, and just highlight it for inclusion. That would be really helpful.
And then we will have to uphold the civil rights protection, use equity or equitable practices in all our policies and practices, and take steps to dismantle systemic racism and oppressive practices that could lead to disparate harm.
Got it. So yeah, if you can send me that language, that would be
I'll
really
be happy to send it, please.
Okay. And since you brought us back to the curriculum adoption, and this is, I mean, I appreciate the conversation that we've had around curriculum adoption and the confusion that you're having around the role of the board. It's not just you. A lot of boards, most boards struggle with this. It's a role that you are tasked under statute for approval of curriculum, yet it's a job that you have delegated to your staff to do, and rightly so, because there's no expectation that a person on a school board has any expertise in pedagogy. So it's important that we do have the experts making those decisions on what curriculum should be selected. The role of the board here is informed oversight. We don't want to be disengaged. We don't just, don't know anything. We just don't even look at the book. We just approve it, whatever. We don't want to be there. And of course, we don't want to micromanage it either. It's not a decision for us to make because we're not the experts. We're somewhere in the middle. We want to oversee that process and make sure that it's rigorous, that there's been adequate input, and that it's been a thoughtful process. Yeah, Satya, on this topic?
On this topic, even none of us are experts. I'm not expert in curriculum. But we wanted to make sure that we follow all the steps that is required by the Division 22. That's all we can do, literally. Make sure it is within the budget, we are not blowing through the dollars and cents and things like that. And it leads to the outcome that our strategic plan goal should lead to. Let's say if I want computer science expertise and the curriculum has nothing to do with computer science, then we should be able to at least ask question, what are you teaching computer science, so that you'll have, that's the goal. So Absolutely. It's what you use the word informed oversight, but it should lead to an outcome. Without that, simply signing off on a curriculum adoption is not correct. Number two, we also want to make sure that different community groups participate as required by Division 22. It is a transparent process. It is a shared narrative and the goal, but district has to tell us, if you adopt this will lead to this outcome. That's where the experts are, teachers and educators. We are not the experts, but we need to make sure all the steps have been followed the way it is intended in the Division 22.
Correct. And that's why the board gets the report on what the process looked like, who had input, what was that input, and that's all reported to you by the superintendent and the teaching and learning team. Perfect. Good. Osvaldo.
Yeah. Thank you. I think if you can focus on governance and policy built in there, I'm not sure how to word it, but just kind of give you an idea of building in our abiding by our governance policies. And then I don't know if that's going into our operating and making decisions process or built into this number 2 area.
I'll find a place for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any more input on number 2? Okay, moving on like a herd of turtles. Here we go. Number 3, the board and superintendent will participate annually in establishing goals. Who brought that up? Was it Maria? Was it you? Someone brought this up. And Satya. Okay, so the board and superintendent will participate annually in establishing goals and objectives for themselves and the district, and will use these goals to focus attention and effort of the governing body. Anybody want to revise that?
I like it. I mean, I guess I must have just like glossed over number 3 when I was talking about number 2.
I got 1. Okay. Is everybody happy with 3?
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay, number 4.
Vincent, I have a question on number 3. Sometimes in systems like public system, I noticed we get carried away by the crisis of that year or crisis of that month. But certain goals we need to continue on a multi-year, multi-step. Otherwise, we'll run to the next crisis and we'll run there. And then next year, it'll be some other crisis and we'll forget the original one. So if you say annually, if we keep changing the goals, our district needs time to build on it. Like dual languages thing. We're talking about 12 years beyond my lifetime or most of our lifetime, we need to continue. Safety is an ongoing thing. It's year after year, we need to kind of building. So how do you think we should weigh in certain things are multi-year project? It's not realistic for us to achieve everything in 1 year. Please, let's not bind ourselves.
We're not. I don't believe we're binding ourselves. This is just a board and the superintendent coming together to plan for for goals and objectives, and then as those issues arise, those will be addressed, Satya. I feel this is a really good statement to settle us down, to make sure that we're planning, like Director Noah's Prezi said, have an annual retreat to set these type of goals out long term, and with the expectation and knowledge that we will be having to face situations that arise, and we'll act appropriately. So there's nothing limiting us from doing that.
So this is a great discussion, and it's an important one, and it's one where there's a lot of confusion among boards and districts and superintendents, frankly. The reality is that we work with three types of goals. We have district goals, right? These are the big ones. You have district goals. I don't have your strategic plan in front of me, but I can go to your website and find out what your strategic goals, what your district goals are. Those are the big ones. Those are your big, hairy, audacious goals, okay? So the board, you have your own goals as well, and they need to be aligned to the district goals, right? So this really speaks to what you were trying to surface, Satya, is that we don't want to be capricious in our goal setting. The goals for the board are specific to the board, really about your practice and your own development, and they need to be aligned to the district goals. Similarly, you are tasked with evaluating the superintendent, and the superintendent's goals need to be aligned to district goals. They also need to be professional goals as well for the administrator. So there's those in those three buckets, with those three types of goals that you get to wrestle with and you need to deal with and align them and make sure that they all work together.
Can you give a concrete example for just for the sake of illustrating?
So I know that equity is one of your goals. Actually, it's cross-cutting, isn't it? If I remember,
it's a cross-cutting thing.
It's cross-cutting. Okay, but say it is a priority for the district. Okay, so a goal for the board could be taking up a particular policy around equity. Say a transgender policy, if you wanted, a transformational policy, one that is going to fundamentally change the way your school system does its work. That would be an example of a board goal. Policymaking is board work. So that would be something that you would say, this year, we're going to take up a transgender policy. I'm not saying you're going to do that, but you get the idea. It's a large transformational goal.
Thank you, Vince. I'd like to get us continue to keep going. It is 6:48 now, and we got some time going. Director Chandigarhi, so we can keep going.
Okay. So annually conduct board self-assessment and evaluate. I'm sorry, number 3. Anything else on number 3? I think we were feeling good about that one. Number 4, annually conduct self-assessment and evaluation. The board will address its behavior by yearly self-evaluation and by addressing itself to any individual problems. Interesting language there. I will need to revise that. That's clumsy. Sorry. Bottom line, you're going to do your own self-assessment on an annual basis. How do we feel about that? Yeah, Satya.
So in the beginning of the year, say by July, we do a baseline self-assessment. Then we do another one in June. That's how we started working when you came and basically talked to us about it. Because I believe in July or August, you finished the first round of retreat and self-evaluation and goal setting. And then towards the end of the year, of course, we need to catch up on that, because then it makes sense. Otherwise, it'll be like an open-ended thing. So then next year, when we set the goals again, saying, here are the things we achieved, here are the things we didn't, let's kind of clean up or fine tune so that we kind of build on that.
So it really depends on the evaluation tool you use.
Yeah.
I would say that in the time that I've been working with the board, and we did a self-assessment, if I recall correctly, we have changed our self-assessment, and it's very rigorous, it's long, and it provides a large amount of information. And so yes, on an annual basis, but it provides so much information that there may be enough that could have a 2-year shelf life. But I think the board should reflect on its performance at least on an annual basis. But I don't want to pigeonhole you into using the OSBA's product. You can use any product that you choose, whatever you think is going to work best for the board.
But we have to use the same thing. Again, yours was a good tool. You like $240 or $300 or something. It's not like super expensive. It was a very thorough one, because if it keep changing the measurement instrument, then we don't know what we are measuring ourselves against.
I'm seeing a thumbs up from Ashley. Other board members, are we feeling good about number 4? Getting a nod from Marty. I think we're all, yeah, Maria.
I think maybe instead of the addressing itself to any individual problems, maybe like something about training.
Great. I apologize for the clumsy language.
Potentially, as we have in our governance policy too, we're supposed to speak as a board. So kind of tying it back to the language of our BG7.
Mm-hmm. On number 4?
Yeah, instead of like the individual. So we can remove individual problems, because they should be self-reflection and of board members through action, through training, and in reflection of the representation of the board.
Got it.
That makes sense for you.
That is going to be hard to read, but that's okay. And I misspelled something, but yes. Thank you for that. With those changes, we're feeling good about 4. Going once, going twice. Okay, moving on. Number 5, the work of the board will be conducted with care and respect. Members strive to assume positive intent and will actively cultivate an environment where matters before the board can be discussed openly and collaboratively addressed. Yeah, Marty.
So this is going to be kind of hard, because I don't know how I can say what I need to say with care and respect. Or if I can even say it without crying. So in this last year, there is no care and respect in this boardroom. I've been trashed by a fellow board member. I've been cut off by the chair to the point where I had somebody email me and tell me they were horrified by what they saw. I've seen leadership speak about the actions of a different board member while they weren't there to stand up for themselves. Every month, people are allowed to trash me, and it's not stopped, even though it goes against our rules for providing testimony. Even though if a parent does something, we stop a meeting. That's not the case for those that like to trash me. And even our superintendent, who has trashed the board on several occasions, when more than several, unfortunately, if she didn't like the way we voted or comments we made. And it is not a care and respectful environment. It is hostile.
Okay, so hence we have this number 5 that I think it's important so that people don't have these feelings. So that's why we say these things out loud. Yes, Satya.
Well, I know how to say it, but I had to say it in a very, I'll be measured in my statement, because I sent you and both the vice chairs, second and first vice chairs. This is a good agreement. We need to eventually get to this. There's a lot of homework we need to do, to be honest. I cannot honestly say we are there. And I don't think with everything going on, with so many pressing issues, the way we see in front of our eyes, both the way we have experienced, not just 11 months, I want to be honest, it's not 11 months at all. It has been going on for at least 2.5 years, if not more. There's a lot of harm has been done, a lot of trust has been eroded, pretty much a lot of these very important, like not only the agreements, but the policies have not been upheld the way it should be. And we're still not completely reached that point where I can safely say, let me go along to get along. Because there has been times where I found it was very little, it was condescending and belittling and made to feel that you don't matter, you don't have anything to contribute. So I'm not holding it against anybody. Whether the times were such that everybody got carried away and they felt justified in kind of looking at each other. But having said that, before we rush in and say, yeah, this is what we agreed, this is what the policy says. If this is the policy says, then we can't be changing goalposts when we want. We have to stick to the same goalpost and we need to use the thing. Number two, we need to also have the ability to speak up when we are in power, when we see injustices. We need to have the ability to speak truth to power. And as the issues come up, we need to sometimes say when the issue comes up or when a discussion happens to say, look, I'm going to disagree with this. These are the reasons. And sometimes when we find that, when you send an email, you don't get a reply, everything is being just blocked, there is no other option left, then I need to have all the tools in my toolkit to say, look, I'm not trying to say I will be disrespectful, but I need to have the ability to speak truth to power and have courageous conversation within the boardroom, not with any intention against anybody. Please, I want that to be thing, because we need to make the invisible visible. Sometimes when we don't speak, we are speaking. When we don't act, we are acting, and we can collude without realizing. So imagine if we had 7 white men who had one type of life experience. We all can sign off. We can have perfect harmony. Then what do we really mean by diversity and inclusion? I may be the lone guy, or I may have an immigrant experience from South Asia. So don't my life experience, my perspective matter. So we need to, that's why we have public meeting where we have this kind of open collaborative conversation. We need to have open debate. Let's explain our perspective. And sometimes good policies come out only in that tension within the boardroom when different people are allowed to explain their point of view, not by silencing them or shutting them down the discussion or looking for solidarity at the cost of good discussion. Sometimes good policy come out from advocacy group like we have had in our community. Sometimes we have to make room for even the small minority who are maybe there, maybe a 50-member community in this town who may not have a voice if just for the sake of solidarity, we kind of go along to get along. So I'm not completely convinced that just because somebody is speaking with an emotion, because in the opening welcoming statement say all emotions are welcome, yet we are saying that that is not what we are going to uphold. So we really have to be clear and make sure we have an ability to process. Just like Director Hines said, there has been a lot of harm in this place for a variety of reasons. And we don't want to acknowledge that. So how can we heal, and how can my community heal where they have found, they have been, so it's, I'm not sure we are there, to be honest. This is a good intention, good aspiration, but I need time to process through this before I can say, yes, we are not going to bring up anything. And likewise, there is another thing, no surprises. What are we talking about? This is a public meeting. In public meeting, we should have difficult discussions. If we can't have a difficult discussion in a public meeting, then where will we have?
So Satya, that's a separate line item.
Okay.
And I just want to pause here and remind the board the purpose of an operating agreement. And that is to focus the board's attention on areas where you want to improve. and elevate values, things that you want to keep front of mind. Think of it as a cheat sheet. Satya, like you said, that you need to be compliant with your policies. And to my knowledge, nothing in line item 5 controverts anything in your policy. So the point of this is to address the concerns that both you and Director Hine have surfaced. So I want to keep moving, Maria.
My thought on number 5 specifically is in the section of cultivating an environment where matters before the board can be discussed openly and collaboratively addressed. And, as you just stated, that like this is something that we want to strive for, because like I also agree with Director Hine and Director Shandagiri about how, there hasn't been a lot of care and respect in the board. And then, probably other issues that kind of lead more into the number 6. So I'll talk about that later. But I feel like, I don't know if it's because like this is my first year being on this kind of board, but like I don't usually feel like there is the space to have discussion or not even like necessarily like debate, because I feel like debate is like trying to prove your point or get the other person to like side on you, but just like even have like an open discussion that's like, this is how I view things. And especially like to Dr. Shandagiri's point of having like this board that is supposed to be more reflective of the community, of bringing in like your own experience without getting shut down or but yeah, I don't know how we would create that space without it tilting too much into just a debate forum and getting distracted from the rest of the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense to me. I think to have those conversations, one, it really helps to have a third party in the room to help facilitate that and to be focused on and set aside, and what you're really talking about is a work session. You can't do that type of work when you're conducting business. Let's be frank. Our business meetings are organized using Robert's rules, and Robert created his rules to create efficient meetings, decision-making meetings. So the board, really operates in 2 channels. And when you're in your business meeting, you're a decision-making body. That's your job. But you also work in this formative channel where you're processing things. You're acting kind of like a think tank for the district, processing things, processing your own experience, your views on this, and coming to consensus around, some shared ground on particular topics, be that equity or SROs or, pick your topic. But you're absolutely right. And what I'm hearing you voice is a desire to have time with your colleagues just to process those topics and find that common ground and work together to find that common ground.
Yeah, and I think like kind of like zooming out is where, having like that retreat, that strategic planning where we can talk about like what we'd like to tackle or discuss, and have work sessions on action items, particularly like action items that might arise feelings in each board member, because I feel like a lot of the times we don't have that time or that space to process before like folks are being thrown in, and then it's like who can be the loudest.
Right. And understand that you have not been operating under optimal conditions. I mean, we're coming out of a pandemic, you've been in a virtual environment. It is a hard time to build those collegial connections with your fellow directors. So, I mean, don't be too hard on yourselves on this particular topic of, we've struggled to come together because you haven't been able to be together and work together as a team. And that's a real challenge. And that's something that, if the board was going to set some goals for next year, setting some time aside just to become a board again might be really a good use of the board's time. Osvaldo.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're providing some really good input, and what I would like to see here and conduct with care and respect. And I think that's also part of staying on task and understanding our role as a board member and through those governance policies of Robert's rules. To be an effective and efficient meeting, we have to stay on topic. So if I cut people off, it's because we're not staying on topic. We're not staying on the content itself. And, you know, I do feel that everything has been going on and continues to go on with the political environment. It's gotten to the best of us. And I think that's flown into the board, and people are really emotional. But as the board chair this past year, and trying to take my role as seriously as possible and maintain an effective meeting, we want to make sure it progresses and it stays on content for the district, for the students, and for our community. And if it takes, you know, a point of order to regroup and reassess, then we need to do that. So I have expectations that our board members understand those clear roles.
Thanks, Osvaldo. Satya?
You know, I don't know what's the simple answer to this. You know, I can only share that, you know, it's not like the last 11 months. I don't want anybody to think it is only in the 11 months we are having difficulty. Our nation has been going through a difficult time in the last 2.5 years. Why it is important is it's really difficult sometimes for each one of us to pivot from community mode to being a board director. But it's really going to take some kind of intentional outreach to people who have different views, different ideas, different perspectives. I'm not saying lightly. We have to. That's the beauty of the leadership during times like this. You'll have to really seek out people who have a different idea than themselves. That is important because when the community feels they are not being heard, there is a section of community that's not being heard, it really spills into the boardroom. So what I'm really trying to say is, just because somebody disagrees doesn't mean they are not respectful. Just because somebody doesn't have my lived experience, my perspective, doesn't mean they don't care for each other or they don't care for their children's safety or academic, etc. I truly believe everybody is coming with the idea that they want their children safe, they want the children to do well. It becomes our responsibility as board directors and board leadership to intentionally go listen to the other side and say, look for common grounds. So maybe there is some skill we all can learn, how to sit and listen to people who totally disagree with us, or how we can help people be seen and heard. Because I see that is getting played out repeatedly in the boardroom. That is my observation. For example, I'm not sure what committee I'm supposed to be working, for example. Let's be real. I mean, last 10 months, I don't know what committee has, first of all, any active committee that I've been included. So if I feel that way, then imagine the community feeling that way. So there are some structural challenges. I don't want to overlook that just because of that. Granted, business meeting, we have to. For example, our business meeting used to last long where people could have discussion. Now it has been curtailed to 3 hours, saying some translation company won't be willing to do more than that. So then the emails don't get answered. Then in between board meetings, we don't get questions answered. So what would be the mechanism for board directors to ask questions or even to share their views? I'm not entirely clear, because if somebody can clarify that, then we can talk about it. If there is like Superintendent Perry used to have three board members, we sat and we spent a lot of time between the board meetings. And every week we had a board meeting, which would last 5 to 7 hours last year. Suddenly the goalposts changed. Now the timing is shrunk. The discussion time has gone down. People don't have time to even get questions answered. So there is a lot of open questions, which is leading to angst in the community. And when the community reaches out to each one of us and saying, please help us find the answer, then to be honest, people are feeling left out. I feel left out as a board member. I mean, I'm not in any committee for the matter of fact. I'm not sure what committee I'm in or which of the functioning committee I've been put. So these are the problems we are seeing. I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat this, but we can get past that. I'm not saying it's not impossible. Last year, I sat in very tense moment. I sat with the BLM leaders. I sat with the SK coalition leaders. We listened, even during the most difficult time in our history. I think it is doable. It's doable. We'll get there. But let's kind of put all that thing in the table so we can acknowledge it, so we can move past it, Vincent. That's what I'm talking about.
So I appreciate, you sharing, enumerating, the problems that you're seeing. That's really not the purpose of our time tonight. Our purpose is to review this document, and clearly the board has work to do about processing and dealing with issues in the function of the board and the interpersonal issues on the board. I don't think anybody is denying that. I don't think that we can get all of that work done tonight. Okay, so I want to pivot to Ashley because she's been patient with her hand up. Oh, and then
I was just going to ask if we could move on to the rest of these to talk through them, but also to ask that we address somehow to collectively that we stop making really overly broad generalizing comments about the full board, because it's not helpful, in my opinion, on moving us forward. I think every single one of us could come up with complaints about how things work or don't work. But when it goes on and on, making lots of statements that I think each of us would try to rebut in a number of ways, it's not productive. And I think we want to agree to talk about the real issues impacting the district without lobbing overly broad complaints constantly. And I don't know how to get us there, but we've all done an extensive amount of outreach to a lot of different communities over the course of the last 11 months. And any statement otherwise is not true. And so how do we address false statements in the boardroom? Like, can we address that in these operating agreements, that we will not say those types of things to one another?
Thank you, Ashley. So I want to check in with the board. Is there any board member who doesn't think that number 5 isn't an aspirational goal for this board? Great. And we're going to leave it in. And if you have ideas for changes in language for this, feel free to send them to me, and I'll do my best to incorporate it. Okay. Moving on, we have number 6. Own the collective decision-making process. Decisions of the majority will be upheld, and the voice of the minority will be heard. Once a decision is made, members will support the decision of the majority, both in the boardroom and in the community. Yeah, Marty.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to change 2 words in here, because I think a lot of issues come to mind when I hear the word majority and minority being basically part of the minority of this board. I think maybe better words to use would be own the collective decision-making process. Decisions of the board will be upheld, and the voice of all board members will be heard. I think with the majority, it's kind of pitting 2 groups against each other. And also just kind of a comment. I mean, I pretty much will always uphold whatever the board decides, but if it's unbiblical or unconstitutional, I will say this is how the board voted and this is what's going to happen. I can't do anything about it, but I may not agree with it, and that's not how I voted. And how I vote is public record. So saying that should not be an issue.
Thanks, Marty. Good suggestion on language. Yeah, I was couching that in language, in Robert's Rules language. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. Maria.
Just wanted to add maybe space for all board members to be heard, something along those lines. Like space will be made or something, like some sort of intentionality.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Satya.
We have to, whatever, once the board votes, we need to respect it. Yet I need to have the ability to explain to the community what that vote meant and what are the, what it will do, yet what is my thinking. I cannot bind myself by saying I will not be able to talk to the community and explain, because community is going to ask me, what was the reason the board voted that way? Why did you vote this way? Why didn't you vote that way? And to have that kind of open discussion is really critical. And also after the first reading, going back to the community and saying, these are the kind of topics we are discussing, I need to have that ability. I don't think we should infringe. It kind of looks like my First Amendment of free speech is being infringed by this particular statement. I don't think anywhere in the policy it says I cannot talk to my constituents.
So correct. And nothing in here says that you can't. That said, when people ask, and so there was a couple things that you surfaced in your comments. First, it's important as members of an institution of the school board that we uphold the decisions of the board. When we don't do that, we erode the board's authority. And so it's important just to support the institution on an ongoing basis that we acknowledge that. And so when people ask, when someone approaches you in the grocery store and says, wow, that vote of the school board last night, that was terrible. And you can say, well, that was the decision of the board, and I support that, even though I didn't vote that way. Because we have to preserve the institution of the board. And I lost my second thought. Darn it.
Vincent, you are just, I don't know if you are able to understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Nobody is saying that once the board voted that we should not support it. Please, that's not what you're saying. But people will ask me, why did I vote this way? I did not right. That way. I should have the freedom to explain why I disagree or why I agree. I'm not trying to speak. Nobody can speak for the board. That's what our policy clearly says. I can't even
Correct.
Speak for another board member, for heaven's sake. But I should have the freedom to say, this is my vote. This is my thinking. These are the pros and cons, the way I see it.
Thank you. And
the board has voted in majority, and that is what is going to stay. That's not, nobody's questioning that.
Good. And you're absolutely correct. You are always entitled to share the reasons for how you voted. What's important is that you don't opine on the reasons why other members of the board voted. We don't know what the minds of our colleagues. And so we have to respect them. And if folks in the community want to know how the reasons why they cast the votes the way they did, they can reach out to those board directors.
So you may want to specify that in that bullet point, that because somebody can say you should just basically not talk about it. No, I really want that spelled out, saying we don't lose our freedom of speech or First Amendment or ability to talk to anybody who asks me from my constituents. I don't work for the district, I work for the community. That's really important to keep that framework in mind.
Now, a clarifying question, are you trying to provide an explanation in the board meeting after the vote has been completed? Because no one's stopping you from talking outside of the board meeting.
Okay. Well, let me explain it very clear. Once the board boards, saying during the discussion, when you call after somebody, first and second, and then you ask for discussion, we all can explain what is our thinking after the first reading. But this reads like you can't, you have to say in the community also, you'll have to, I'm not saying we should not support the vote in the board, saying this is how the board voted, this is what we're going to live with. But if somebody asks me, why did you not vote this way? Why did you vote this way? I should have the freedom to explain and help people understand. In my social media, in my talk in the temple or in the church or in the grocery store, because people are going to ask you, why did you not vote this way? Why did you vote this way? What does that mean?
So I would say that should be clear, and it would be recorded in the minutes, because when you take up an item, you have an opportunity for debate. And the reality is that is when you should express your reservations. If you're going to vote against a motion that's before the board, the time to share that is during debate before the vote happens. And indeed, it's really your obligation. If you're if you are saying, no, I don't think this is a good idea, it's important that you surface that concern, because your fellow board members may not see that problem. And so it should be apparent to the public, from the way you cast the debate that you had before the vote, how it's recorded in the minutes, and now how it's recorded in video. And so it should be clear for everyone to see.
Vincent,
why
that we should have the freedom to go to the community and keep explaining, because not everybody has that minutes or the video. So people do ask in the community, maybe when the agenda comes out, or after the first reading, or even after the board, they'll say, okay, now what happened and what this thing. So I don't think, again, make it very clear, the board voted this way, that's what we are all going to uphold. But what is your personal reasoning why you voted this way or that way? The reality is we have to explain to people. We can't say, I'm sorry, I can't talk about it, go check the YouTube. That's not possible.
And I don't think anybody is
okay.
Certainly that's not the intent. The other piece to this, and this is the upholding the board and decisions of the board piece, and how we talk about it after the fact. You do this work long enough, you're on a board long enough, you're going to be in the minority and you're going to lose. Happens. It's happened to me. But when you're in the majority and you're in the prevailing side, you expect everyone to support the decision of the board. It was your choice. You got your way. So when you're in the minority, you have to play fair. So it's just playing fair is what it really comes down to. So Satya, before I turn to you, Karina has been very patient.
Thanks, Vince. And I think just wanted to make comments about, this, we're just talking about the democracy of the board here, right? Like, we're talking about the board decision. So I don't know if people are getting hung up on like the word supporting and saying that hence there are to be supporting the outcome. And I understand that might not always be the case, and that we might have, we might differ with what the ultimate outcome is, but it is about being respectful. It is about respecting, the democratic process that has taken place, that the community has asked for, and that those of us who sit on this board are here to represent. So it's, we all have our right to also speak. So, nobody can monitor what people are saying outside of the board. And I think that we just have to have good faith. And also when expressing ourselves about what we voted or how we voted, that we do it in a respectful manner of our fellow board members. So just wanted to kind of voice that.
Thank you, Karina. Ashley?
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling now that we've had this conversation to fully understand what maybe we can better define support. Like, what does that look like if it is a split vote? What does support look like in the boardroom and community of a policy that we pass? Does that look like promotion of the policy, or silence on the policy and just not active undermining, let's say. Like, I'm trying to like think of an example and I can't on my feet, but just with what Director Chandagiri was saying, you know, if we vote and it's a split vote and two of us vote no, let's say, and I immediately go to my social media and start talking about why I'm mad this passed, is that what we're saying we won't do if we make a decision, majority passes the decision, we've had the opportunity in the boardroom to say why we're voting no and part of the discussion, then post that passing, we are sort of silent on it then, and we uphold the work of the district that applies that policy from that point forward? Or am I making sense? Like, I need to flesh it out a little more about what we're actually agreeing to do.
Yeah. And so the point here is that the school board is a voluntary association. No one made you run for school board. You chose to be here. And as a group of individuals, you can choose to set standards for your behavior. Now, no one's taking away First Amendment rights, and you can say whatever you want in public legally, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other repercussions based on what we say in public. And so on this particular matter, it is important in the way that we interact. And when we say support the decision of the board, it means that we're not talking badly about our colleagues. We're not talking badly about the district. You might surface the reasons why you said in the meeting why you had reservations about a particular decision. That's fine. But always following up with, but I support the decision of the board. The reality is that the board is something bigger than each of us. And in participating in it, it's important that we support that institution. So when you're having these conversations, or you're on Facebook and you've drafted that post, ask yourself, when I post this, is that going to support the institution of the board? And is this what's best for kids? And if you can answer both of those questions as yes, I'm supporting the board, this is going to make the board stronger, this is going to make the district stronger, and this is going to work well for kids, then go ahead and post it or say it. But if you have reservations about that, then you might withhold that. But we don't want to erode that, because the next week, the next board meeting, you may be on the other side of that vote, and you would expect that of your colleagues. Did that help, Ashley? Okay, Marty.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, sometimes you may not think that the majority of the board voted in a way that is best for the kids, and maybe an easier word to use is basically accept. I might be able to accept the vote of the board, but not necessarily support it. I may not think it's the right thing, but I can accept that's what it is and move on.
Got it.
And that's very reasonable. That's enough. Okay, Satya.
Well, I agree with Marty. We just because I accept the majority vote doesn't mean I don't see problems in that policy. So in a democracy, we need to have continuous ability to speak truth to the power. Otherwise, you can end up having systems or policies which will only perpetuate systemic inequities or barriers. So I may continue to evaluate, including my own vote, sometimes saying I voted this way, but this particular policy is adding to systemic racism or systemic barriers. I need to go back and rethink or come up with a policy. So I really think we can't just lock ourselves away from the important accountability and continuous reflection of our own actions. And so we have to accept whatever the majority. That's the beauty of democracy, is you accept the majority. But doesn't mean you don't speak truth to power and constantly keep evaluating. Otherwise, you can end up having racist system or oppressive system that can vote in majority, and we can perpetuate systemic inequities, and decades of disparities can continue if we don't question ourselves. That is the beauty of our nation, that we should have the freedom to question our own decision, including my own decision. I should be my own critic even after I vote. So that's my thinking. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I really think just because we have asked courageous question doesn't mean we are disrespecting anybody. That's the way it works.
Thank you. We have 5 questions left, and we need to get moving to complete this time.
Yep. And so these last few comments, I really appreciate that changing, support for accept, completely reasonable. And the reality is it's the reality of the situation. A decision of the board is binding. There's no point in protesting it after the fact because the decision's been made. Now, if the board takes it back up again, you can reconsider it, but there's no point in going on social media and complaining about it because it's done. Move on, because there's other board work to be done. Start working to overturn that previous decision if you don't feel it was appropriate. So, following the chair's lead, let's go on, move on to number 7. Practice efficient decision making. Board meetings are for decision making, action, and votes. We agree to move to the question when discussion is repetitive. Yeah, Marty.
I think this is a good one, but I just would be careful that we don't do that too soon. I know there was a time where I had another comment to make and the question had been called and I thought it was a pretty important point. So hopefully we'll have some balance with that is all I'd ask of the board.
Good comment. Thank you, Marty. Maria.
Yeah, this is again like one of those spaces where it's like I'm unsure about like where the space would be made in the business meetings. So I don't know if it would make sense to add something about work sessions, because I just feel like a lot of the times like I know this is something that we strive for, but I just feel like a lot of the times like the business sessions don't give us the space to do that. And by that, I mean, like, without like, I worry that essentially it would just be like, oh, in the sense of efficiency, we're just going to blow through it.
No, and great suggestion, and I captured it there. Work sessions will be used to allow the board to process. I'll come up with some better language to make that a little more on point, but it really does a good job addressing the problem that you surfaced earlier. Osvaldo.
And I think one of these, what's helpful to understand as well, I think even in like an onboard training, would be the understanding of Robert's rules of the discussion. So before making decision making, having a round robin as stated in Robert's rules, have each individual that wants to say something about the topic, they get an opportunity, and then they get a second opportunity after all individuals have had an opportunity to say something. So having that clearly stayed out and having that agreement as a board, that knowing ahead of time that that's when your moment to express and share what you need to, that I think that is the space that's being made available.
Great. Thank you. And I'm glad you used 2 times round robin. It's a great tool. Satya.
We go through the first reading and we go through the say action item for voting. Efficient answering of questions when an email is sent to the board leadership and the district is really important, because a lot of these questions can be answered if timely people are willing to, if we get the answers to a lot of these questions so that we can really come prepared without asking. The second thing is to cut down the actual presentation by the district so that we can really call the question very quickly and then send us the information so we can read and be prepared before So that way we can bring it down to discussion of what this means during the actual board discussion time. But those are the two suggestions I would like to say. If we have all the information, give us enough time. I mean, they're anyway sending us the information, but if you send it sooner, we can be prepared without having to spend, say, 75% of the time for district presenting the slide by slide and leaves just very little time for discussion.
I captured that as get reports offline and keep reports short in meeting. I should clarify that in meeting.
More like a SWOT analysis the district can tell us. They are the technical expert, more like a SWOT analysis, and just tell us strength, weakness, opportunities, threat, and call the question, and then we can come down.
Right. And I mean, that can be the norm, but with the understanding that from time to time, the district is going to bring some, big reports, on large, complex topics. Great. Everybody's happy with 7? Great. Okay. 8, don't spring surprises on other board members or the superintendent. We agree to ask the board chair or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting. I see hands going up. That's a hit a nerve. Okay, Marty, go.
Thank you. So yeah, as a practice, if I have a question ahead of time, I have usually emailed or texted the superintendent, giving her hopefully time to get an answer ahead of time. Unfortunately for her, sometimes it's a minute or two before the meeting. The biggest problem, of course, is when the questions don't come to you until you're in the middle of discussion. And, then I don't necessarily expect an answer right away because I know I have sprung something on her that she wasn't prepared for. When it comes to getting something on the agenda, I would hope that when we have 3 people that want something on the agenda, I hope we can make sure it gets on the agenda in a timely manner. I'm going to be sending, so not to surprise anybody, I'm going to send something tonight to you, Mr. Chair, for something I want on the agenda, and I have support for it. So anyway, hopefully it won't take very long to get it out there. I think knowing that something can get on the agenda sooner rather than later will help people not spring things maybe on the boardroom.
Okay, thanks for that, Marty. And thanks for the discussion of how you prep your meeting and interact with the superintendent. I couldn't have said it better myself. Maria.
I'm not a fan of like the wording of like don't spring on other board members or the superintendent. I feel like I sound like a broken record. Like I feel like this is one of those pieces that I would really like if we could have like a retreat and like long range agenda planning, because like a lot of the times it just feels like there's just like things getting lobbed on and people forget about other requests because like there's just so much that's just coming kind of like rapid fire at you. So that's why I feel like it's hard to sometimes not spring quote unquote surprises when like for example, to Marty's point is that like things don't get put on timely. Well, I mean, was there ever even actually like a plan in the first place of when it was going to happen? And some sort of like actual confirmation that's like, yes, we will get to this in 2 months, in 3 months, or what have you.
So I just made a note. Agenda planning information will be shared with members. Just try to create that transparency. And the reality is that sometimes that agenda item that we really want to get on in a meeting has to wait because there's a ton of stuff, OSBA. Well, you guys don't get policies from OSBA, but there's a bunch of policies to take up or whatever. There's a lot of things that are really pressing that need to be addressed. And so it's going to be 3 months before it gets onto a meeting. It's important that the chair, communicate that so people understand it's like, oh, okay, we have all these really important things, and just so you keep checking in on it. So there's that transparency. So I captured that.
Especially when like you have things that are kind of come up regularly. Like So then that way we know, like, oh, there's more space in 3 months. We will for sure get to it in 3 months, or it's packed until 6 months from now.
Yeah. Or we're just not going to get to it this year. Like the dress code policy in Corvallis that we put off for, I don't know, 3 years. Sorry. It's a pain point. So I'm in that position too. I totally feel your pain. I totally get what you're talking about. Satya.
Yeah, I disagree with this. There are certain times where we should be able to ask the question because there are set matters of urgency that comes up. Sometimes it's a national event and parents are worried about the safety of their children. So there are certain topics that it's not an agenda topic, but there are certain questions that has to be asked in a timely manner. We cannot wait for it to go through the agenda setting and wait 3 months. Second, when the report is presented and we see the expulsion, suspensions, or other kind of discipline safety issues go up, we need to have the ability to ask the question. That doesn't mean it's a surprise or anything like that. Those are timely accountability questions. Parents have that, and they have an expectation that we bring that up so that everybody can get an answer to it. I don't think we should even include the word "don't surprise." Nobody is here to keep surprising anything. It's like everybody's seeing it happen. It's just that we are asking these questions in a board meeting. Going through the bureaucracy of saying it'll come under the agenda planning, or you have to get 2 more directors to agree to it. Certain matters of urgency cannot wait. We are talking about national events which parents have been worried. We are talking about the increasing number of unprecedented discipline problem our district is facing. And when we see certain things are not, the parents say it's not being addressed, then we have to ask those questions. And in between, if we don't get an answer, I do not have any other place to ask. If I don't get email answers, if I don't have a mechanism to ask this question, so where am I supposed to ask those questions? Sometimes this is how you dismantle systems that are entrenched, by holding myself accountable, holding each other accountable, and making sure that we are asking those questions. So how can you speak truth to power if you locked yourself with that first statement, don't bring surprises on each other? I want you to hold me accountable. I want my fellow board to hold me accountable. So please, I don't want anybody to say, limit our ability to call out if there is something I'm doing is not correct.
So Satya, I'm curious, can you give an example of an item that is so operationally immediate that you could not?
Yes, I will be happy to share with you.
Or pick up the phone and call and discuss with the board chair or the superintendent prior to bringing it into a board meeting.
There were, for example, last year we voted as a board that every month we will report our discipline rates and suspension, expulsion. We called it safety indicators, monthly real time. Right? Come July, it stopped. And the numbers kept going up. So I brought it up. Our first vice chair said, when the numbers go up, they will let us know. The numbers keep going up. So finally I had to ask this question. I want to go on the record to say, this is not what we discussed. These numbers are going up. These are all red flags which can lead to some bad event. So we need to really start addressing it. We need to get back to that oversight, which is the responsibility of the board. How the district does it is the operational business of the district. Safety is a responsibility of the board. So I asked that question, saying, I want to go on the record saying this is not the way to, we had promised our community, we had voted. So without a board action, that suddenly it stopped. Now we got it back on track, I'm trying to tell you. But if I didn't have the mechanism to ask that question in a public board meeting, I don't know what would have been the other mechanism, because there is no answers I was getting. I was getting all kinds of different answers to my email question. So I'm sorry, I had to ask that question. And I felt it was necessary in my...
So this is a great example. And so in that meeting, when you asked the question, did you get information about discipline in that moment?
So that led to a series of other questions where I was asked to called in and say, why did you ask such questions? That I'll be happy to go over if you want, but I'd rather sit down and discuss, saying, I said, there is no board policy that governs why I shouldn't be asking. And I said, I really felt a need to ask that question when our concerns of safety is getting out of control. Because these are the children who are having a disparate, children of color and vulnerable children are getting disciplined at a disproportionate rate. I have to ask that question.
I understand. And so the superintendent did not have the information that you wanted. And that's because you didn't ask the question ahead of time.
No, I had asked the question ahead of time. I had emailed everybody ahead of time. I didn't get the proper answer. I got different answers regarding the thing. So
this is why we have the agenda planning process, and so why we have those dialogues with the superintendent and chair to make sure that it gets on there, so you get the information that you need. So when we ask a question of staff, and they're not expecting it, they're not prepared to answer our question. And these are forthcoming individuals, these are professionals, and they will try to answer our questions, but they're not really prepared, and we don't get the best information. And so we always want to, help our staff be prepared to meet the needs of the board. And if email is not an effective tool for communication, then there's phone calls, there's one-on-one meetings, there's a variety of different ways that we can communicate. And I don't want to, and so Satya, I really don't want to process it. I'm kind of trying to talk about what are the best practices for navigating this situation. And if we want to process this further on how to get information from staff and how to navigate that, we can have that in a separate training on how to do that and how to interact with staff and have effective, managing, how to manage our agenda. How do we manage the information in the board meeting? But understand that a board meeting exists for the conduct of the work of the board, not an individual board member. So even though I care a lot about the dress code policy, in Corvallis, and I do ask from time to time, I have those conversations offline about when can we get that policy on an agenda, and do it that way. It's because I'm trying to plan and make sure that my staff is prepared to enter into that conversation. Okay, I've got a lot of hands up and I have 12 minutes. Karina.
Thanks. Just to be brief, the language on this, I'd appreciate the language to be more on like, how will we approach it, right? So like, board members will proactively, reach out to XYZ. And like, I think that's kind of the language that we approached on most of it, that positive approach at least. So I hear some folks kind of getting caught up on the, don't do this. So let's frame it with what can we do and what should our approach be? And proactiveness, like proactive communication is what comes to mind, whether that's reaching out to other board members or admin. So thank you.
Message received, Karina. Thank you for that asset-based approach rather than the deficit-based approach. I really appreciate that. Maria.
Yeah, as a subsect, I was wondering, since we're being kind of aspirational with some of these, if there's some sort of like expectation that we can put in terms of like the response, because like what I'm hearing from Satya is that like he felt like he needed to bring something into the boardroom because it wasn't being responded outside of that. So like if there's some sort of like expectation to the response or the timeliness of it, I guess.
Thank you. And Osvaldo.
Real quickly, to that note, it's when we don't get the answer that we want to hear, that is being provided, the information is being provided, then bringing it up in a board meeting is the surprise. I like the language that Karina has suggested, but how do we respond professionally in accordance to our governance policies, to not spring up those I guess agenda items that possibly didn't get put on that next meeting or the meeting that's coming up, to respectfully get a response and respect that decision from board leadership as we try to bring that forward. And yes, some things are pressing, some things are not. Some things are found to be pressing for others, and less to others, right? So we have to be able to find that balance and make the right decision.
All right, thanks, Osvaldo. I'm going to move on to number 9. Recognize the role of the chair to speak for and about the board to the press and public groups. The chair responds to group emails sent to the board. Nevertheless, be mindful that you represent the board in the public eye and that no individual board member has the authority to speak for the board, save for the chair. Osvaldo, your hand is up. Is it still up, or you want to speak on this one?
No, it did not put it down. So give me a second to read that again.
Then I'm moving on to Marty.
Please.
Yes, thank you. So just a couple things. I will always respond to people that reach out to me. And if somebody wants me to talk, I will always talk to a group. I will tell them I'm speaking for myself, that I don't speak for the board unless I am the board chair. But being the board chair doesn't mean that you just make your decision stands without, at least when I was on the board chair, when it came to the question of SROs, I didn't decide the board stands behind SROs. I polled my board and asked them what they thought unofficially, not in a vote, just where their thoughts were at. And I had full support from the board. And so in that instance, I felt safe to say our board supports SROs. Now, had I not asked the board, then I don't think I would have the right to say our board supports SROs or doesn't support SROs, because the chair kind of runs the meetings, keeps everything organized, helps us stay on task and function, but they aren't a monarchy. It's not their decision. And I just want to make sure that, we're really clear on that. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. I can say better myself. Yeah, you're always welcome. So if an individual member of the public, emails a board member directly and not the rest of the board, sometimes that happens, then you're welcome to engage that person. Yeah, and you're able to speak in public. You just need to be careful to stay in that lane, and it can be really hard sometimes, particularly with news media.
Actually, well, I tend not to engage with news media if at all possible, but we frequently get emails sent to the entire board, and I respond to many of them. And for many of those people, I'm the only one they've heard from. So I feel that's part of my job. They elected me to be there, to be their voice. And certainly any other member of the board can respond to them as well. And everybody knows what I'm giving them is my opinion.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's important that, and we can talk about email protocols and, after this. So Satya, I want to get your thoughts here.
I disagree with certain things, but chair only should speak for the board, which is what I agree. Chair should speak to the press if it is representing the board. But each one of us are allowed to speak as an individual board member to the press, or respond as an individual board member to the email, which might have included my name. But I'm not responding as on behalf of the board. I have to be very, very clear. Number one, I don't think we should limit ourselves from reaching out to the press. I am a public servant. I'm also a physician. I got multiple hats I'm wearing. So there is no one should be able to take away my ability to speak to the press or write on an issue that pertains to the public, etc. I should not be speaking on behalf of the board. But sometimes we are asked questions once the board has already decided it's in the public domain. I said, yes, our board passed an anti-racism policy. We are all supporting that. But that doesn't mean I'm saying speaking for the board, but I'm saying this is the decision that is already made in the public domain. So public domain information, I'm allowed to, as per our policy, I can repeat what has already been there and the decision has already been made. People have to be educated about what we passed. So I don't think this should not be construed saying I cannot answer the press, I cannot reply to an email and things like that. Then how else will we connect with our constituents in this pandemic?
Great, thanks for that, Satya. I don't think that this statement erodes any of that. It doesn't take away an individual board member's ability to interact with the public.
Yeah, and I feel it aligns really well with our board member code of conduct, so I appreciate it.
I might have borrowed some language from there. Okay, any other comments on number 9? And with the permission of the board, can we have like an extra maybe 5 minutes so I can get through this? Because if I can have this, then I can go ahead and make revisions. So
I'm fine with that. Everybody else, thumbs up? No? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the indulgence. I apologize. Okay, number 10. Board leadership will keep the board apprised of the logistical matters about meetings and upcoming topics. Members will ask questions prior to meetings and will come fully prepared. I apologize. Will come prepared to fully participate. Oh, I'm sorry. It must be getting late. Yeah, Marty.
This is my last question or comment for the night. I don't even have a comment on our last one. So I think this is certainly an area that we can really improve on. I know a lot of times I feel like I'm in the dark. I don't know what's going on. And I know members of the public feel that way as well. And when I don't know what's going on and they ask me, then, you know, I can't help them as well as I would like to. So I hope this is something we can work on and do better.
Great. Thank you, Marty. Maria.
Yeah, I, again, just think maybe if we can have something like tangible on the upcoming topics, mostly just because, or like, you know, let me organize my thoughts. I think it's hard to come fully prepared when we only have like so many days prior to the board meeting, like receiving like the materials. And so like maybe something tangible on like timeline on when we can expect to receive information. So like, for example, for me, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but I have ADHD. So I really need time to sit with materials and process them, and getting them Friday night before a Tuesday board meeting, like, does not lend me to be a fully prepared board member. But if we can get them at least a week ahead of time, then I can usually have more of like a developed thought process.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having adequate time to prepare a packet is important. So that's a great discussion that the board can have, you know, maybe as you're planning next year, is how can we ensure that the board has materials, you know, with a little more lead time. Anything else on number 10? I've worn you all out.
You know, the number 10, you know, we do get sometimes, you know, 2 months lead because we go through the first reading, etc. And that's the time where, if, as board members, if we can answer each other's email or the leadership can clarify, and that way we are not just getting an answer a day before the board meeting or things like that. So really, let's kind of do some homework before that. And, you know, sometimes this is my anxiety. So I often write voluminous email before trying to make sure I'm reading and being up to date. And sometimes when I don't get an answer right, you know, for months together, and then I have to wait till the last minute, then it doesn't help me to be fully prepared in understanding their thinking. Then it looks like it's been surprised on me. You know, it's like I feel that, okay, this looks like decision is already made. What am I supposed to do then? So that's a reason that kind of openness is important. I really think, you know, there should not be any secrets between board members or the district and board members and district board and the community. So let's be transparent. Let's flush out all those things before the actual board meeting, so everybody knows why we arrived at that decision. I'm not saying we should agree on how to vote, but at least we can understand and clarify.
Thank you, Satya. So that's all great work. You know, you could take that up in your organizational meeting as you're teeing up your next school year and talk about, you know, how are you going to do prep, when, you know, get some good feedback from staff on how realistic it is to extend out that when you get the packet, and just understand that the longer you push out, the harder it is on staff, you know, so just be mindful of that. Okay. Last one, board members will communicate with one another should an issue or problem develop between them. So this is, you know, just resolving interpersonal issues. You know, if you got a bone to pick with a fellow board member, the way that we try to resolve that is at the lowest possible level. Sounds kind of like your complaint policy, you know, so have that personal interaction to resolve that if you can. Satya.
You know, don't wait till there is a bone to pick with each other. You know, up to 2 or 3 people can sit down and have a cup of coffee. There's no policy, no law says you can't sit down and have a cup of tea with me. Maria sat with me in the IQ box. We spent 2-3 hours. So get to know each other, because, you know, going back to your initial ground rules, assume the best intent on each other. We all have a reason why we ran for this. We all have children, we raised them, and there is a reason we all want the same. So we need to really start taking time to sit with each other, have a meal, have a coffee, or whatever it is, get to know. And that way, a lot of our own cognitive impressions of each other, and we can get past that and then realize that we're all working for the same, we are pushing in the same direction. We may have a different approach, doesn't mean we can't reach the same endpoint. To me, the 11 is the most important thing. I think if there's one thing that is hugely missing, is there's a trust deficit in our community and within the board. And we really have to get beyond that trusting deficit if we have to accomplish all the other 10 points. And that gets played out repeatedly. And once we feel we are divided, then everybody can take advantage of the board, and the children are harmed in the process. So a divided board cannot stand on its own. In the end, kids suffer. So I really think 11 should have been the number 1 number. You know, that's the most important piece. Please, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee and get to know each other, get to listen to each other's story or whatever it is that you want. Because really we can get through a lot of these things. This is an unprecedented time with such a fantastic, diverse board we have. We need to really get something done and move further. So thank you.
Great sentiment, Satya. Thank you. And Karina.
Just wording. The word misunderstanding came to mind, and I was wondering if you could either substitute for issue or problem, which seem a little redundant for me. But I think a lot of the times it's misunderstandings. You know, we might be misunderstanding each other or miscommunicating. So that's all I had.
That is a great suggestion. Thank you.
Can we also add strive for ongoing communication when?
Ooh, like it.
Just come and hang out with me. I'll be happy to, sit down, and let's kind of make it a point to reach out to different communities. I'll be happy to join any one of you to sit down with you and go meet anyone. And maybe two of us can sit down, have a cup of coffee, and then go meet different communities in town. So we can demonstrate to the community that we may have different perspectives, but we can still reach out across different points of view.
Great.
All right.
Okay, thank you. It's 8:05. I've used up my 5 minutes. I'm going to take just one more minute to jump over to the development plan that we had discussed. Operating agreements. We are still here on operating agreements. Here, I can make it a little bit bigger, Marty. It's one of the problems with Mural is it doesn't display very large on the screen in a virtual setting. Operating agreements. We are still here. We are weaving roles and responsibilities into this. It's one of the reasons why, I've taken time during this process to discuss, best practices. Board self-assessment. I just want to get a straw poll from the board. Would you like to go ahead and proceed with the board self-assessment?
Yes.
Give me a thumb. Karina got thumbs. Marty, how you feeling?
Sorry, my brain did one of those things for a second.
It's that hour.
Yeah, it's like, what?
Yeah. So you feeling good about doing a self-assessment? It'll give us a lot of information.
I might be open to it. We'll see.
Okay. Ashley? Yep. And I think Osvaldo, you're good. So Karina, I think I've gone around the horn. So great. So I'll go ahead and get that out to you folks soon in probably the next week or so before you guys escape off to your summer break. And we'll get that data in, and then the board can decide when you want to go over it. Summer is board development goals. That's when we debrief that sort of stuff. It sounds like we were going to do some more work on operating agreements. We still have that board superintendent operating agreement to do some work on. And then we had talked about equity governance work in the fall, but that's all kind of perspective. Let's take a look at that board self-assessment data and the board can make some decisions on where you want to head. But I just want to express my deep appreciation to each of you being candid, leaning in, working hard. I want to just scroll out here and look at all, we got a lot of great input on this document. I'm really looking forward to, digging back into that and making those revisions. Thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time, and I yield back to the chair. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you all the board members as well. Very candid and courageous conversations we've had tonight, and help it build more trust to work through. We've identified continued issues, and I think hopefully we can reach out to one another. Vince, very appreciative. Looking forward to the next steps. Thank you everybody for being here. RSL interpreter, our interpreters for our different languages. Vince, just one request, if you can send over the results of that short, quick exam through email, and we'll get it out to everybody to see how we did for ourselves.
Oh, I don't have the results. We were gonna walk through it. It's a facilitation tool. So next time, don't lose those. Hang on to them because we'll use them this summer when we do a little more training.
Excellent. Well, it is 8:09. I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
For more videos and information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.